Hi everyone, this is Melissa Keller, Director of Events and Project Management for Vineyard Worship. We release new music on the first Friday of every month. Vineyard Worship is truly a global family with over 2,400 churches worldwide. Familia, Vineyard Worship's latest monthly single, is a perfect representation of this reality. Featuring Tina Colon-Williams on vocals and produced by Grammy Award winner Dwan Hill, Familia is an organically bilingual, joyful celebration of the family of God.
Let's come together and worship the Lord. Todos juntos. We are a family, the family of God. Somos familia de Dios. We are a family, the family of God. Somos familia de Dios. Somos familia en la cruz, como en el cielo.
Find Familia and all of Vineyard Worship singles wherever you listen to music.
I have a small percentage of a job with Vineyard Nordic Worship, and that was even before this music company happened. Before, my role was more to bring the countries together, and there was kind of nothing happening. So we have summer camps where I, for example, facilitate all the worship and our Nordic conferences. So we started having online huddles because we were from 4 different countries, trying just to get people to connect, to know each other. Then you start hearing all these songs that were written and people were singing them. And the only way that we could share the songs was to have them played on our conferences and summer camps. We didn't have an outlet. And now we put out call for songs, so everybody can send in songs, and we pick one and we just do small acoustic recordings, so it doesn't cost us too much money to do it, and that gives us a lot of freedom. And we try every time we gather, if we have a call for songs, we pick a song and we have it recorded as we are gathered anyway.
The Ferment. You're listening to the Ferment podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is Maria Hinge from Vineyard Worship Nordic in Copenhagen, Denmark. Peace. All right, what's up, everybody? Adam here. You're listening to the Ferment podcast. And my friend from Copenhagen, Denmark is with me, Maria Hinge. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I'm good, Maria. I am so happy that you're here with me. I haven't seen your face in a minute, and it just feels, I know it's Zoom, but feels good.
Oh yeah, it still feels good.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's start here. I know who you are and I know what you do, but why don't you just introduce yourself to everybody who's listening to the podcast and tell them who you are and what you do, not just at your church, but for the Vineyard movement there in the Nordic region.
All right. First of all, I'm from Denmark, so I'm in Denmark. My name is Maria, and I am heading Vineyard Nordic Worship, and that consists of Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland.
Amazing.
And then I'm also heading the worship in Copenhagen Vineyard, which is the biggest vineyard church in the Nordic countries. Still, I don't think it says a lot compared to vineyard churches in the United States. We're about 600 people, I think.
You know what? Here's the thing, though. That's a good-sized church anywhere, you know?
Okay.
That's amazing.
But let's see. Corona time, you don't really know who's still here. But
Ooh, tell me about it. Tell me about it, Maria.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, let's start maybe a little back in your history, and let's talk about growing up and what your early life is like. I'm assuming that you were born and raised in Denmark?
Oh, yes.
Yes, talk to me about that.
When I was a kid, there was no vineyards in Denmark. So I'm from an evangelical free church. I can't remember when I met Jesus. I don't remember before or then. I remember that every Sunday in Sunday school when I was about, 4 or 5, I asked Jesus to come into my heart. That's the way we say it in Danish, just to make sure that it actually happened. So
That's right.
so I grew up I played the piano. So of course you get involved in worship, youth leader, whatever, when you're in church and you grow up and you play music, that's what you do.
Yeah. Well, talk to me about the evangelical free church that you grew up in, because I'm assuming, and I could be wrong, and you can set me straight here, so that's totally fine. But I'm assuming that has its own cultural identifiers or its own culture, especially being in Denmark, where, as I understand it, there's not a lot of Christians, right? So talk to me about, like, what was your church like, and what was it like being a believer in a country where there's not a lot of Christians?
Yeah, that's probably more interesting. I grew up this being a free church, so we didn't have a lot of meetings or collaborations with other churches. Now it seems like the churches in Denmark, all across denominations, they are working a lot more together, which I really think is great. But we had worship. We also had hymns. It was a mix. So I grew up in that, and I think we also sung all Vineyard worship songs. Just we didn't know it was Vineyard. That was just, but they were translated into Danish.
Isn't that amazing? So
yeah.
What you're saying is that somehow, even in Denmark, a few decades ago or what have you, when you're growing up as a little girl, some of our own Vineyard worship songs are getting translated into Danish, and they're becoming a part of your kind of like common hymnal at your church.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember the songs?
Oh, I hope, maybe, because I don't even identify them as Vineyard songs, because they were just songs I grew up with. But I'm thinking, isn't More Love, More Power a Vineyard song?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The Danish title is Mere Glæde, Mere Kraft.
Sounds great. So
we sang that a lot.
You grew up with those and had no idea that was going to be a part of your future. I think that's what's interesting to me.
Yeah. I had no clue. But then being a Christian in Denmark, I think I'm not completely updated with the statistics as it is now. But it's very common that you are always the only one in your class being a Christian. And people think that you're weird, that you believe in, that God created the world. And I was bullied in school because I was a Christian. And I actually ended up moving school in 5th grade because it was both the students and a teacher who was bullying me. And I don't remember much, but I think a big part of it was because I was Christian and I wasn't quiet about it.
Man, I hear that. That must have been painful, even as a young child, because when you're a kid, your faith is innocent, and even the way you present is innocent, or at least that's the way it is in my head.
Yeah, I think you just grow up with the feeling that you always have to defend yourself. You always have to have some kind of defense ready for what's coming next. You're always a minority.
Yeah. So what has that meant in your life? We take it forward here. You're an adult. You're a strong woman. You're a leader. You have a husband and children. You're all grown up, but I'm just wondering, and maybe you've never even thought about this. I'm just wondering what it must be like to carry that, I'll use the word anxiety, of always having to defend yourself. What was it like to carry that through your whole life? Or is there a certain point where you just kind of let that go?
I think I've let it go as I grew up and, got more involved in church. And But I think I had 1 year, I went to a Christian boarding school. And after that, I went right back into the school system is not exactly the same, but it's called gymnasium, and it's quite similar to high school. And I realized when I got back into that secular world that I had lost some of my defense because I didn't have my guard up all the time. So I had to get back into practice.
Amazing.
I had like one year of relaxing. And then it became all worse because then you start in Denmark, you don't have to be 21 to drink at all. It's
right.
also very, so you stand out very differently when you're 15 and you start in high school and you don't drink and you don't do all that other stuff that everybody else are doing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know if it answered your question.
Yeah, no, it is. I'm just very curious in how a person manages that feeling for a long time.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, you're all Danish, or especially since you and I are talking. On the one hand, you've got this whole section of the world, in my brain, the whole Nordic world, and you're different, you're distinct, but in my brain, you're cousins. You're very similar.
Yeah.
Your culture feels kind of similar, and then for you to have a faith that inside of this culture that feels, for me, strong and connected, for you to be distinctive inside of a monoculture, that's,
yeah.
I'm just very interested in how you manage that for a really long time, and if that changed you or how you've carried it.
Yeah, I think it helps. It shapes your identity because wherever you go, you know that you're always different. And growing up and being a teenager and young adult, you always face the negative questions like, why can't you do that? And you're so conservative and you have to prove the opposite, or do you want to prove the opposite? So it's part of your identity. I think when I got out of school, I got a job inside a Christian NGO. So I kind of got it more into a Christian bubble. So I didn't have to defend myself as much, but still we are living in Denmark.
Yeah.
And the parents of all the kids in my boys' classes and in kindergarten, we are still, strange to them.
Yeah.
We are strange to our neighbors.
Yeah.
It's not normal to go to church. We have the thing of, for example, they always put the kids' birthday parties Sunday on church time. And I had to put it up on a meeting. Like, would you please not have it at that time because we're actually going to church? And people look at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah. Well, I guess I have another question that's sort of in this vein, Maria. When you were growing up and you're talking about just the distinctiveness that being a Christian brings to you. And of course, that makes people ask all kinds of questions, Oh, what's Maria doing? Well, she's a Christian. I'm wondering if you had a friend or two who just sort of accepted you as you were and was like, of course you're a Christian, and I think that's a little weird, but I don't care.
Yeah, I did.
Talk to me about that.
I have a friend who I have from way back from high school, and she's going to visit me in 2 weeks. We haven't seen each other for 2 years.
Amazing.
And she's not a Christian, but we're still friends, and we have shared life and everything. And
Beautiful.
She's been with me to church, and I've not been pushing stuff on her, and that's completely fine.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. I love when God gives us friendships that sort of defy what we would consider to be normal or what would be expected. I think that's just such a gift. I mean, Christian friends are clearly a gift, but even this other friend that you're talking about, I just see that as even a work of the Spirit. Even if she's not a Christian, it's somehow a work of the Spirit.
Yeah. But I have a couple of those. And I think it's important to not just be in the church. And it's very giving to have those friendships and not feeling like you have to have a hidden agenda every time you're together with them. Just be yourself.
Yeah.
With everything that's to it.
Yeah. Well, this brings up a couple more questions for me, especially just as it relates to faith in Denmark. You and I have been talking about how Christianity is much, much different there than it is here in the United States, just in terms of the scale of people who believe or even have a clue of what that might mean. Can you talk to us about how people become Christians in Denmark? Does that question even make sense to you?
I'm not sure how to answer it.
Yeah, okay, let me just set it up this way. Because here in the United States, even if you're not a Christian, you definitely know Christians. And you probably at some level know the Jesus story. Like maybe even better than you think you know it. And so, especially here, I'll just say in the American South where I live, people know about, and I'm using air quotes here, people know about getting saved. You know, even if they haven't given their heart to Jesus, like you said earlier, people know about getting saved. They know that they probably need God to do something for them, and that if they ever want to get serious about their faith, they'll go to a church, and at the end of the meeting, they'll stand up, or they'll go meet a pastor, and someone will pray for them, and they'll ask Jesus in their heart, or maybe they'll get baptized. And, you know, there's a formality to it, and we kind of culturally all know it, even though some of that's really changing here in America. So I'm just wondering, what does that look like in Denmark? Like, how does someone come to faith? Do they just have a friend who talks to them for years? Do they go to a church and just stand up? Do they go to a church for a year and not believe anything and then maybe call you or write you an email and say, I kind of want to follow Jesus? I don't know. What is it like?
Yeah, well, I think I have to give a little background before I answer so it makes more sense.
Yeah, I love this.
Because I think with the statistics not being updated, I think it's about maybe between 1% or 5% being like Jesus followers in Denmark. Mm-hmm. But we are a Christian country, like culturally Christian. So the church is part of the state. That also means that there's a lot of problematic stuff related to that about the democracy and what do they want to push the church to do. Yeah, liberal stuff. It also means that they are used to that you get baptized as a child and you have a party because it's just tradition. You also get, it's called, I don't know if this is the same word in English, confirmation, when you confirm your faith. Mm-hmm. And that's a big party when you get a lot of gifts. Mm. And it's such a part of tradition. And then you go and you get some teaching about the Bible and stuff. People do it for the party. And even if you don't want to be confirmed in your faith, people still have a party and they call it non-formation. Well, too good. It's pretty new, that part. Okay. We didn't have that when I grew up. So there's some cultural factors in that. But still, people, they are scared of free churches. That's strange. That's not normal. And if you say that you go to a church, the picture people will have in their head is, an old church building with 5 old ladies and someone playing the organ in front. Yeah. That's the picture you will get in your head when I say I go to a church. And then if I say, yes, I play music in a church, they think that I play the organ. Yeah. So I think in our church, it's, friends inviting friends into the church. Yeah. And then something happens during worship. Yeah. Or during the message, kind of. But I also met people who were just searching and reading, and God met them through that. But I think it's mostly like you bringing friends into church, and we try to have different kind of side door ministries, social work, and you get to know people, and they get to see that we are not as scary and strange as they think we are.
I love that. I just love that it's so deeply connected to friendship.
I think that's primarily,
I think that's even true here in the United States too, Maria. Most people who come to faith, it's God working through families, or it's God working through friends and relationships. And, just somebody reaches out and says, why don't you come to church with me? And, over the course of weeks or months, God begins to kind of like slow rain, just soften up hard places and gets inside on people. It's beautiful.
But that sounds good.
Yeah. Well, let's maybe shift gears here just for a moment and talk to me about your life as a worship leader. I know you said you grew up in the Evangelical Free Church and you played piano, so right away you were kind of absorbed into what was happening at church. But I'm wondering, did you always want to be a worship leader? Were you always kind of like musically bent, or what happened? Talk to me about that.
No, I wanted to be a musician.
And what do you mean by that? Do you mean like a pop star?
I don't know. I think
Like
I
tall
started
black
playing
boots?
the piano as 4 or 5 years old and just thought, I'm going to play music.
Yeah.
Then when you're in the church, you play. But when I grew up, worship was not cool. It was not, I remember we had, when I was a teenager, we had a Christian pop band, and we played all these pop songs from back then, where it was before Delirious. I have this, I don't know, in my mind, there's before Delirious and after Delirious, where they changed kind of, suddenly worship could become stadium rock. And before that, it was like this something we play in church. So if we wanted to go out and evangelize, we would play soul and gospel and funk and maybe some DC talk and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We didn't really write our own songs. But but I wanted to be a good musician. And we had some really good musicians in the church, and we didn't have a culture of worship. And now, I'm just going to tell a story now, and stop me if it's not right on. But so I grew up where we had like a youth group, and I was in the youth worship team, and I was in the adult worship team. So we would rehearse every Tuesday, play every Friday, and probably every Sunday as well. And because I was a girl, and I was maybe 1 or 2 years younger than the rest, these other guys, and they were teenagers and insecure, but at that time I thought it was terrible. They didn't talk to me. Like, we would spend so much time together, but they would have an attitude. Like, it would be, evaluating each other for the musical capacity, and there was so much bad attitude. It was quite traumatic. And we were doing worship together. And I think when I look back, I think we were playing Christian songs and we were doing the motions, and we didn't have anyone to lead us or to mentor us in what worship was actually all about. Because we were just in church and we played these songs because that's what you do. So when I was about, I was 20 years old at that time, my plan was to become a professional musician, and I applied for the conservatory prep school to go that way. And in the city I was at, I think I did singing as like my first thing, and then piano as the second. I don't know how you say it in English. And they said I was good enough, but they only needed one singer. So they didn't pick me. They picked my friend who dropped out later. And I was like, okay, God, what I'm going to do with my life. And I ended up applying for YWAM, Youth with a Mission. And I went to a school where they had a lot of music and worship. And I thought, okay, I'm a musician, so I'm going to go there. And I had such a problem with the worship there because I think when I came, I couldn't get past that. I didn't think that the musicians were good enough. I mean, how can you worship if it's a bad drummer? And I had learned from the culture back home that, if you're a musician, you have to have an attitude. And I had such a bad attitude. And I didn't understand why they didn't pick me for the worship team. I was the one who was vacuum cleaning in the main hall while the worship team was practicing. And I think that was very healthy for me. And then on YWAM, they have, if you do a discipleship training school, you have a 3 months like theory. We go to school and then you have an outreach somewhere else. And we went to a country called Kyrgyzstan. I didn't know it existed until we were going there. It's located under Kazakhstan and next to China. And it's a mix of a lot of different Asian and Russian cultures. Quite interesting. And this is a few years ago that I was 20 years old. So it was about 2000. We got a place where we could rehearse. We took a band, a Christian band, and still it was not about worship at that time for real. I just still wanted to be a musician. And we were trying to find a place where we could rehearse so we could go out and play some gigs. And we found a place where it was like a black metal venue. It was a bomb shelter and it was underground.
I love
and
this
you had
already.
to walk down like a lot of stairs, and there was these big pictures of demons with guitars on the walls.
Yes.
And everybody had long hair and a lot of black makeup.
Yes.
And they were like, oh, because still in that time, just that we came from the States and from Europe, it was so cool that we almost got famous just for being from not Kyrgyzstan. And we really sucked.
This is great.
We were so bad. But they said, you can rehearse here as long as you promise to give us 3 concerts at our venue. I was like, sure, we'll do that. That's what we're here about. So first concert there, we were going to play, and there was another Kyrgyz Russian black metal band. So we were doing the first set. They would be in the middle, and we'll come back on. It's lovely. And it was on the ground, and all these people with long black hair and like looking really scary when you are 20 years old and from northern country. So when the black metal band, they played in the middle, the spiritual atmosphere just really changed. And we could all tell. And when we came back up on the stage, we were not able to play together. So when we started the first song, and the song, it was Delirious Obsession.
Yeah.
And for those of you who know that song, it's very, very simple when you start it. It's just bass and drums.
Yeah.
And they couldn't play together. They were all, I don't know. And I was, the lead singer standing in the middle of the stage, and I was so embarrassed. I wanted to run away. And all the self-consciousness about, we are so bad. How can I be here? And I don't know how long it took, but we all at some point individually just said, okay, God, you got to do something because we are terrible. There's nothing here we can do. And this is so embarrassing. And then the Holy Spirit came in a way that I don't think I've ever experienced, or not very many times since, in that room. And he took over. And it was so, we heard instruments that were not present. And the people who were there, they were either just being scared or they were worshiping Jesus. And the bass player, he got so excited that his jaw got disconnected because he was just screaming for God.
I love this.
And we just started worshiping like I've never experienced in my life before. And I consider that night the turning point from when I went from being a musician who was playing worship songs to become a worshiper who was also a musician.
I love that. I love the
And
distinction.
I think that's because that's the way I grew up. I grew up without the worshiping culture and knowing that, it's not about what I can do. It's all about what he can do. So that was a milestone for me.
I love that story. Thank you for telling that. I just love this picture of you. I'm assuming that everybody else in the band is like late teens, early 20s as well?
Yeah. I was the only European.
Okay.
They were all Americans.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're just this mostly American, one European. You're in Kyrgyzstan in a black metal bar. And God comes on you. Isn't that
Yes.
amazing?
Yeah. I think it's amazing because that was what they least expected at that place.
Yeah. So when you all were rehearsing there and even going to play there, Did the people who owned the venue, did they know you were Christians? Did they, or did they just, they don't care because it's like American and so let's just go for it or whatever?
I think they didn't care. I mean, they put us on the radio. We were pretty bad. And they put, I think I have like an old newspaper article, and I think they gave us a bad review.
I hope you still have that.
Honestly, we had a drummer, and he had only one hand.
It's like Def Leppard.
He put a boxing glove on his, on his hand and put a stick in it. So, I mean, it does something to your technique, but it worked.
Okay, this story just went another level for me. This is one of the best stories I've ever heard. So you had a one-handed drummer.
Yes.
In Kyrgyzstan, in a black metal bar. No one knows anything. The black metal guys come up. The spiritual atmosphere is insane.
Yeah.
You can't play. You're trying to play Obsession by Delirious. And somewhere in there, God begins to meet you, and it's changed your life up to this point.
Oh, yes.
Set the course.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Maria, let me tell you, no one has that story. That's yours.
And the rest of the people, but I unfortunately don't have contact with them anymore.
Well, hey, listen. Listen, if you're listening to this podcast and you were with Maria on this trip, will you please reach out to us through Instagram or something, right? We need to reconnect. I'll do a podcast with the whole band.
Oh, yeah, that could be fun.
Okay, so I want to go back to your story on one thing that you've mentioned twice. So just in sort of retelling your story, you've mentioned Delirious twice. You said earlier there's sort of like music or worship, at least in your mind, that's before Delirious, and then there's worship that's after Delirious. And then you said in this story how you're in the black metal bar. I just love that. And you guys are playing a Delirious song. So it just feels like, for whatever reason, Martin Smith and Delirious, that's deeply connected to your story. Why do you resonate so much?
I don't know. And, I've never seen them live.
Really?
Yeah, I've never seen them live.
Amazing. Amazing. So when you say that there's worship before Delirious and then after, what do you mean by that?
I think, at least for us, maybe it was different for you guys, but for us in Denmark, like good music wasn't worship music. If you're a musician and you look at it, it was something that the older people played in church. It was kind of nice. But also because we didn't grow up in a worshiping culture, the way that, nobody mentored us or told us what worship was all about. We just looked at the style, and that didn't appeal to us.
Yeah.
And I think when they came in, some things started changing, and you could see yourself, even if you really wanted to pursue music. Okay, that's interesting. And then, of course, my whole perspective on worship changed. So that's when I came back from that trip. It didn't matter about the style or anything else or how good people were anymore. I can't really tell. I mean, it was just a change of heart.
What up, songwriters? Adam here. I want to tell you something that's coming up in November. November 8 and 11, and then also on 16 and 18, we are hosting a virtual edition of Song Lab. That is a Monday and Wednesday on 2 consecutive weeks. 4 sessions total. These sessions will be inspirational, they will be instructive, and they will be geared towards actually writing. We're going to make space for you to co-write with others in long writing blocks so that after these sessions are finished, everyone will have written on at least 3 different songs. We will be joined by Dee Wilson from Common Hymnal, and then also Leslie Jordan. And maybe you know Leslie from her days in All Sons and Daughters. And we'll also be joined by several of our very best Vineyard Worship friends. So if you're wanting to write, If you're wanting to grow, if you're wanting to refine your craft, this is the event for you. Sign up at vineyardworship.com. Well, I want to go back to your story a little bit too, and maybe ask you a couple more questions. You were talking about how you wanted to be a musician, and you were talking about how, or at least one of the things I was hearing was how important being a good musician was. I think you even used those words a couple times.
Yeah.
And then you were also talking about how when you got to YWAM, you were sort of excluded. You didn't get it. You were like, why am I being, these guys are not even any good. Why am I being excluded? And you're like sweeping in the foyer or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, through all of that, has that shaped your leadership? Like as a worship leader and as a pastor, what parts of that have come into your own leadership, and what parts of that story have become something that you try to communicate to the people who are with you or the Vineyard worship leaders there all over the Nordic region?
Yeah, well, I think it has shaped me quite a lot. Just to end the story, I never became a professional musician. And I'm happy with that. But it also means that when I gather musicians and I recruit musicians and I talk to worship leaders, I'm very attentive to, I don't want them to start having an attitude. To how can we be inclusive and how can we be real? How do you create a good atmosphere for everybody who comes into the church and come into the worship fellowship? We just have to be inclusive and loving, and I have zero tolerance for attitude. I think.
Yeah, I hear that. So talk to me about when someone gets added to your worship, like your worship team there in Copenhagen at the Vineyard. Talk to me about like how you add people and what you're hoping that they experience when they come into your team.
Well, we have, I think, made a lot of mistakes on the way, but the way that we do it now is we first of all invite them into a fellowship. So we host, right now it's a bit more difficult, but we host these evenings in our living room where we invite everybody who's involved in worship or interested in worship to just come worship together. I share something and we pray for each other. And it's both to include new people and to let them know it's not all about what they can do, but it's about who they are. And both, if you're new, I think it's important to not be pulled straight onto the stage. And a lot of these people who have served for so many years, when do they ever get to get prayed for? Because they're always playing when somebody else gets the prayer.
That's good.
Where do you get to share your life and have a fellowship that's not just about, technical playing the songs? And of course we pray and it's not just rehearsals, but I think that is what has worked the best for us. And then when they have been into that community for a while, then we can start asking, are you interested in joining a band? Or we have also something we call the resource list, because people get sick and have a grandmother's funeral or something, so we need extra people. So we try to do it that way around. Get to know the person, invest in them, be together with them on their journey. And then sometimes you get a good musician or a singer coming up and I really, I would love to be in that stage. And I think it's a great way of meeting new people. And I have to tell them, I don't think so. I think you should start joining a small group and come to my house. Let us get to know you.
Yeah.
Pray you and God. And That's how we do it. It's not always easy, especially when people are new.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But what I do love about what you're saying is you're attempting to make it relational first.
Yes.
Yeah. And not just who's the best drummer or who's the best singer, but who's actually connected to us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I guess I want to shift gears again, Maria, because
Sure.
I want to talk to you about leadership for a minute. Because you're a worship leader, you're a songwriter, you're all these things. I know you're a musician. I also know, just from my friendship with you, that you're really administrative. You're very good at getting things done. You're a detail person. I also know that you work at a nonprofit. And I just want to reflect to you, like, one of the ways I experience you is I experience you as this really kind but really strong leader. Like, so I experience
Thank
you
you.
as someone who's not afraid. And I also experience, like, just your kindness. So it's an interesting balance there. And this is just some of the stuff that I've just noticed as I've been around you as a leader. But I'm just interested in this, I guess. Have you always wanted to be a leader? Or did leadership just sort of like naturally happen with you and through you? Or was it something you pursued?
Do you want to know the story? So,
Yeah,
no,
of course. Especially if it has
I didn't
black metal.
always want to be a leader.
Okay.
I was actually thrown out of a church.
I love this already. Go ahead. You have to. You opened the can. Let's hear it.
A few years after I was in the DTS, I felt I was something about me and the States, and I wanted to go back. And through a connection, I got invited to become an intern in a church somewhere in the States, and I'm not going to be more specific than that.
That's right.
And one of the things that you find out as a European, or maybe also as a Danish person coming to the States, is that we think that we are very much alike, but culturally we are not. I've had a lot of people saying to me, when I met you, I thought you hated me. And I really thought I was being kind. But we are not as like, oh, it's so nice to see you. It's awesome all the time.
Yes.
And
by the way, that was your attempt at being American there for a second. That was your impression, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love you.
Oh, you were awesome. And for those of you listening to the podcast, I'm zooming with Maria right now, and she's waving her hands as she does this. It's very fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
We are the kind of people that if you ask me how I'm doing, I will actually answer how I'm doing.
That's right.
But that also means that I think maybe in Denmark, maybe I'm generalizing here, but we are maybe more blunt. We say things as they are.
Yeah.
And that could be a problem when you are in the beginning of your 20s and you find yourself in a church where things are not working. So I would, address things because that was what I was used to.
I love your word. I love your use of the word address. I would address things. That's too good.
So by addressing things, I was, putting words to that was actually a problem because nobody else dared to speak about it. So long story short, I was thrown out of a church.
This has to be so painful, especially for...
That's like the most traumatic experience in my life, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because I felt like God had called me to go there. So
Wow.
to, move on the other side of the world and thinking you were working hard to make a difference and then being thrown out. And I didn't want to make a fuss or mess. I didn't want to, cause the church any pain. So I didn't speak about it because I was afraid what that was going to do to the church.
Yeah.
But I remember having the thought and I think I was 21 at this time or 22. Now I know how you should not do church. And that's very effective learning.
Yeah.
And I also had the thought, oh no, I'm going to be in leadership at some point, and I hope it's not anytime soon because this is just too hard.
Mm. Mm.
So I knew, and I mean, I didn't like the thought. The problem is, you know, in the Enneagram, I'm a 1.
Yeah.
I want to fix things that are not right.
Yeah.
And that gets me into trouble sometimes.
Yeah.
So, because I want, and I have a 9 wing. So I want to fix things and I want everybody to be happy at the same time.
Yeah. And, you know, that combo right there, that can build a lot of internal pressure because you do see what's wrong.
Yeah.
You pick up on that easy. And at the same time, it's not like you're heartless. You want people to be at peace, right?
Exactly.
And sometimes even those two goals can be at conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Okay. So you go to this church, you address things, they kick you out. It's extremely painful. And at the same time, you know, internally that you feel like you're a leader and you're already thinking, number 1, well, I know what not to do. And then 2, I don't know that I want to be a leader anytime soon because, wow, that was really painful.
Yeah.
Talk to me about when some of that began to soften and you began to find your footing as a leader. When did you start taking up leadership again?
Actually, right after that, because it was not just, you know, being thrown out of a church. They wanted to know, you know, when are you leaving the country?
Ooh.
When are you on a flight back home? So I flew back to Denmark and I was crushed. And I couldn't go back to my old church, even though I loved it, because I knew as soon as they saw me, they would try to involve me in all kinds of stuff, worship, youth leading, and everything. So that's how I accidentally stumbled into the Vineyard. I think I met the Vineyard Church when I was in YWAM. We visited different churches, so they probably had one. It was in Montana, a small church somewhere in Montana. But I think Vineyard in Denmark started a few years before that. So it was about 100 people in Copenhagen Vineyard at that time. And I had a friend who had just started to come there. And I went to visit her. I didn't even live in Copenhagen. And she brought me to the Sunday service. And I was part of worship. And I just knew, okay, I'm going to move to Copenhagen. And I'm going to go to this church. I mean, I didn't know what the Vineyard values were or anything. I just felt at home when they were doing the worship. So I moved 2 weeks after. I didn't have a job. I stayed at my grandmom's until I found a place to live and found a job. And I quite fast got a hold of the pastor. I said, you need to know my story and you need to know that I cannot do leadership. I cannot be involved in anything. I just need to go and, you know, be completely, how do you say it in English? I would say like a vegetable on the back row and do nothing.
Yeah.
So that was how I got into the Vineyard.
Really? So when you talked to that pastor, was it Fleming?
No.
Okay. So when you talked to that pastor and you told him your story, did you tell him the part about the American church and how it didn't work?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And so what did he say when you said, hey, I had this experience and it wasn't good and it kind of blew up. I just need to be a vegetable on the back row. What did the pastor say?
I don't remember.
Okay. But you just said, hey, welcome to the Vineyard. Glad you're here.
Yeah, you can't be a vegetable. But I remember to step into leadership, of course, the problem is that somehow they found out that I could play the piano. And I wasn't able to be completely passive more than, 3-4 months.
Yeah.
Then somehow I ended playing the piano and singing, but I didn't want to be a leader.
Yeah.
And there was a really lovely couple who spent hours and hours just praying over me, like soaking healing prayer, because I was so broken and so devastated. I didn't think that my life would ever be right again. Mm. And I didn't consider leadership, at all. It was just what I'm going to do with my life, how I'm going to survive, need a place to stay, need to do some university stuff. Leadership was not on my radar.
Yeah. So do you think that couple who was praying for you all that time, do you think that prayer and that ministry was what helped remove the trauma?
Yes.
Yeah.
They also, broke some of the spiritual strongholds that had, lies I had believed, words that had been said to me. I think that was the primary reason why I'm in ministry today, that they did all that prayer.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you another question about leadership. Aside from this couple who saw what was happening in your life somehow and just began to pray and minister with you, what's been the most helpful thing, or the most helpful relationship, or the most helpful principle that you've learned on your leadership journey?
Oh.
Because you've been doing this for a while. You've been leading not just locally, but you've been leading nationally and translocally for your whole region and your whole Nordic worship movement that's kind of beginning to emerge there. What's really helped you on your journey?
That's a really good question. Maybe I have another answer tomorrow, but right now what I'm thinking is always to look at the people before their abilities.
And what does that mean to you?
I think especially in worship, it's a ministry where it's so, you bump into a lot of people who have a gift. But does that mean that they are worshiper? Not necessarily. You also bump into a lot of people who maybe have been hurt because they have a gift and they've been playing and playing and playing and have not been seen as a person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I'm really committed to invest in that part. Yeah.
And I hear that in your story too. It's kind of a little theme that's been threaded through everything that you've had to say to us so far. I'm also wondering here as well, is there a person who has invested in you as a leader? Anything that you can think of in terms of a relationship or someone who's seen you, and I'll just reflect your words back to you, seen you as a person and not just as a talent? Or
I think there's several people. There's, of course, Fleming, our pastor. I think he has done that. And also another pastor who was the worship pastor when I started. His name is Hesse, and he's back in our church now. So that's after planting churches. So that's really wonderful.
What a gift.
But I think even connecting to some of you guys across countries and oceans, sometimes it's very significant and very encouraging.
Yeah. I'll never forget when you and Morten, your husband, came to the Vineyard Worship Retreat in Oregon.
Oh, that's one of our best memories.
Oh, I'm telling you, listen, I've been doing these things forever, and that was one of the best weeks, and it was just such a joy to get to know you two.
We are joking about how my husband Morten got saved for wine.
That's
that
right.
Week because he met you and Jason.
Oh yes,
Jacob.
Well, and that is such a funny story because you and Morten came. We were in Oregon. We spent basically the week on the coast, and then afterwards, I think it was me, you, Morten, Jason Hagen, and was it Dave King and his wife, a couple others.
Yeah.
We went wine tasting in the Willamette Valley, and of course we all had a great time. But apparently this was life altering for Morten, right?
Yes.
Like he became awake to Pinot Noir.
He was not interested in wine before.
Yeah.
Now our house looks different. I'm telling you.
I love this. I so love this. And what's really funny, and this may just be funny to me, but I'll tell you and I'll tell the listeners as well. Pretty frequently, and by pretty frequently, I mean once every 2 or 3 months, I'll look down and my phone will just start buzzing, and it's Morten, and he's taking pictures of bottles of wine that he's found at like random shops, or you guys will go on summer holiday to France or something, and Morten is just, he's loading the car, and I get all these photos, and it's just great.
Oh yeah, you have to come back and see all the other stuff he has acquired since you were here the last time.
Well, I'm taking that as a firm invitation, and I just want to say, as soon as we get COVID finished,
oh yes,
Morten is coming to see me, but then I'm going to come see you guys as well. So, okay, hey, listen, one more question on leadership before we get out of this. And this is something I've been thinking about lately. What do you do when you feel ill-equipped or when you feel inadequate? Because this is something that sometimes we don't talk about enough as leaders. You know, if you end up with a spot of leadership in a church or in your family or at your job, eventually you're going to be asked to do something that you don't really know how to do.
Oh, yes.
I guess what I'm trying to say is this. There's something about leadership that brings us harder problems. It brings us things that didn't get resolved at another level, and so it ends up in our domain, if you'll put it that way. And then I've just been reflecting lately on how many things in the last few years I've had to pick up as a leader. And at the beginning of it, I felt so ill-prepared. I just didn't know what to do, you know? And so I've been trying to talk to other leaders as well to just go, well, what do you do when you face something and you don't know what to do?
Well, I call a friend. Or I write someone. Because I agree that happens a lot. And since is 1.5 years ago, we started up Vineyard Nordic Worship as a music company again. And I'm not that kind of person. Just have to learn, and it's a really steep learning curve. And I have no clue what I'm doing. And I'm hoping for people's grace and patience. And but I think the cool thing about starting something new or doing something new as a leader, if you have people with you, we are all kind of, enthusiastic about it in this baby stage. So there's not so many expectations so far. Yeah. So when there's not that many expectations, it's easier to just try and do stuff.
Yeah.
And, look into maybe this works, maybe this doesn't. Read some books, try to steal some good teaching from someone else, and get some good advice, I think.
It is funny how reaching out is such an important thing to do. And with the way that the world works now, with the internet, it's actually possible to reach out to someone who does know, or at least knows more than us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So true. So true. Well, Maria, before we wrap up, would you tell everybody a little bit about Vineyard Nordic Worship? And I guess just before you do that, I'll just frame this for everyone a little bit. Like in the Vineyard world, we have a few record labels that are kind of like independent, even though we're connected, at least relationally. So there's Vineyard Worship US, there's Vineyard Worship UK and Ireland, and you guys have kind of gotten together, Vineyard Worship Nordic, and that represents those countries that you had talked about earlier. But I would just love for you to share a little bit more about that, because I've been listening to some of what y'all are doing, and it's really beautiful.
Well, I think that the good thing, again, is that there's really no expectations, because we don't really have money involved. So it's all on volunteer basis. I have, a small percentage of a job with Vineyard Nordic Worship, and that was even before this music company happened. So just to say, so before, my role was more to bring the countries together, and there was kind of nothing happening. So we have summer camps where I, for example, facilitate all the worship and our Nordic conferences. So we started having online huddles long time before COVID-19.
Because you guys were pros.
We were, because we were from 4 different countries, trying just to get people to connect, to know each other. And then you start hearing all these songs that were written and people were singing them. And the only way that we could share the songs was to have them played on our conferences and summer camps. We didn't have an outlet. So at some point, we have been really blessed also by Vineyard Worship in the UK. Back sometimes, I think in the 90s or the beginning of the millennium, 2000 something, there was a Vineyard Nordic Worship thing going on. But I think they spent too much money. And so UK helped us out and got all the songs that were produced. And so they had been holding this, and they offered to give it back to us because, and that was incredibly generous, and they've helped us getting started. So they gave us back our catalog, and we registered, it became a music company, and now we put out call for songs. So everybody can send in songs, and we pick one, and we just do small acoustic recordings. So it doesn't cost us too much money to do it because we don't really have a budget. And then we also have, for example, Copenhagen Vineyard. We did a fundraiser. So we did a live recording project with a full band. But again, so I think our church, they raised 30,000 kroner to get that done. So we don't have that much money involved, and that gives us a lot of freedom to be creative, see what happens. And we try every time we gather. If we have a call for songs, we pick a song and we have it recorded as we are gathered anyway. So that's how it's going so far.
Well,
COVID,
I love it.
I'm not sure the plan.
I really love it. I'm so happy that you guys are picking up your creative gifts again and sharing them with the world. I know that a few months ago, I was just scrolling through a bunch of the Vineyard Worship stuff on Spotify, trying to make sure that I was fairly up to date on the things that were happening around the world and just listening. And I stumbled across the song that you guys had written and put out called Dry Bones. And it really touched my heart. I had somehow missed it when it first came out, which says more about me than it says about you. But wow, when I finally found it, it really, really touched me. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that if you're listening to the podcast, you'll go and check out what's happening with the Vineyard Nordic Worship folks, because a lot of the songs are in English even, and it's a wonderful expression of what God is doing in your area of the world.
Yeah, please do so. We have, I don't know if you know this, Adam, we have a problem right now because the Danish Coda, which is the company that take care of the rights of songwriters in Denmark, they are not friends with YouTube right now. So they have banned everything that's Coda registered right now. So, but we have some songs that when they're from Sweden, and we have the latest song we put out, they didn't register, even though we advised them to do it. So you can still see it. So you can't see as much on YouTube right now as you hopefully will when they sort their problems out.
Okay, well,
Let's go on Spotify.
Well, we will look on Spotify, but then also as soon as some of that gets sorted out, will you just tell me so that we can tell everybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
Can I make a small? There was a song written that's not banned because they didn't register in Coda as we told them to, which I think is awesome right now. And it says it's called "Build This House," and it was written just before COVID came out. And it says, "If you don't build this house, we will work in vain. If you don't guide our steps, we will lose our way. If you are not our source, we will not have strength. For we are broken vessels, fallible and frail. We surrender to your ways."
Yeah.
And I think that's just been a theme for us to listen to that song throughout the summer and this fall now. And we are singing it in our churches. And they wrote it because they were buying a new building for their church.
Yeah.
But it has gained so much more meaning.
We lay down our plans in humble surrender. We will wait for you to go on before us. If you don't build this house, we will work in vain. If you don't guide our steps, we will lose our way. If you are not a source, we will not have strength. For we are broken vessels, fallible and frail. We surrender to your ways. We surrender to your ways. We lay down our plans and ask for your wisdom. We're in need of you to clear up our vision. If you don't build this house, we will work in vain. If you don't guide our steps, we will lose our way. If you are not a source, we will not have strength. For we are broken vessels, fallible and frail. We surrender to your ways. We surrender to your ways. Your ways are higher than ours. We don't understand, but we can trust your plan. Whatever you lead us through, we'll follow. Your ways are higher than ours. We don't understand, but we can trust your plan. Whatever you lead us through, we'll follow. We'll follow you. If you don't build this house, we will work in vain. If you don't guide our steps, we will lose our way. If you are not a source, we will not have strength. For we are broken vessels, fallible and frail. If you don't build this house, we will work in vain. If you don't guide our steps, we will lose our way. If you are not a source, we will not have strength. For we are broken vessels, fallible and frail. We surrender to your ways. We surrender to your ways.
Maria, I want to end here, and I want to end with the question we ask everybody on the podcast this season. Talk to us about what the dream of your heart is right now. What are you carrying on the inside?
Yeah, well, I expected this to be coming, and I don't have a clear answer, but I think what really is one of the things that I'm really dreaming about is to see what comes out of this COVID thing in worship, in the way we do church. What kind of life and creativity comes out on the other side. When the church are shaken like this and we can't do anything that we are normally doing, I think it's so annoying, but I think it will bring something good as well.
Yeah.
And I would love to see more authentic worship, people connecting through worship. And I think it's been kind of beautiful to see how, the live worship that you put out, and we did it the same in the Nordic region, how people connect to, simple stuff. It's like the more you put it on a stage with nice lights, the less people would connect to it because you needed that connection. And I really thought it was beautiful how Vineyard Worship could do something that we really needed in this season.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see what's going to happen a year from now. And also thinking the first time we talked about doing a podcast, I think it was right before COVID hit or something. That would have been a completely different conversation probably.
Yeah.
So I long to see what will happen. And I long to see people being free to worship and in their own way. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. And you're right. There's no way that this season doesn't change us. Yeah, it's going to shape us and turn us into something new. No question. Well, Maria, thanks for telling your story, and thanks for what you're doing for Vineyard Worship in Denmark and in Sweden, Finland, and Norway. Thank you for who you are. Thanks for your team. And I know a few of the people over there, and it's just been a real blessing to get to connect with your people.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
Oh, you're so welcome. So welcome. All right, everybody, go on to YouTube, go on to Spotify, look at what Maria and all of her friends are doing. Check it out. Put it in your playlist. That stuff really helps. All right. Peace.
Hi everyone, this is Melissa Keller, Events Director for Vineyard Worship. If you've been enjoying the podcast, I've got a couple of ways you could really help us. First of all, review the podcast on iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media, Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. Thanks for listening. See you next time.